Hi, everybody. I'm Dick Schreiber. I live in Los Altos, California, and it's April 14, 2024. And I want to thank Janice and Nathan and Kevin for giving me the opportunity to tell some funny stories about Glenn. And it's a huge challenge to do so because there are so many and so much material to choose from, but I'll give it a shot. I first met Glenn in about 1974, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And he was a member of the Sierra Club Whitewater Paddlers group in San Jose. And so I started going to these meetings and met Glenn and his good friends, Tony and Alan Burrows. Alan lived next door to Glenn in an apartment building in Sunnyvale on a nondescript street called Maud Avenue, Maude. You know the woman's name, Maud. Anyway, here's a Glennism for you. That wasn't good enough for Glenn, so he referred to his address as being on Avenida de Maude. This paddling group consisted of about maybe 20 people, most of whom were single guys, mostly engineers from Silicon Valley. And there were some married couples in there, including Tony and Alan Burrows. And the married couples mocked us, bachelors, as being hopeless losers, no girlfriends, no wives. And so anyway, here's another Glennism. Glenn decided to dub us single guys FUBs, which stands for fouled up bachelors. And you can imagine that the word fouled wasn't actually used. It was another F word. Anyway, so we were the FUBs for years afterwards until we eventually got lives and found wives and girlfriends. Glenn and I drove all over the West in his VW bus that was tricked out as a camper. And more about that bus later. That became kind of an infamous vehicle. Anyway, we drove all over the place, and we were laughing so much as we were heading to the river that I think by the time we got to the river, we almost broke some of our ribs. And during a lull in the conversation, Glenn would do something to reignite the laughter. For example, at one point he was driving along, and I saw him scratching his head vigorously, scratch, 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 and shaking his head. And I turned to him and said, "What's wrong?" And he looked at me and said, "Schreiber, my brain itches, my brain itches." Got us laughing again, of course. I remember one day going over to his apartment on Avenida de Maude and opening the front door and walking in and being met by an overwhelming odor of oil and grease, and looked down, and there on the living room floor on a tarp, he put a tarp down, was his VW bus engine. And he was just such a determined guy. He said, "Look, I can fix this. I need to overhaul it, but I can do it myself. I don't need to go to a mechanic." And I asked him, "Well, why are you doing this? So much trouble." And he said, "Schreiber, you've got to be smarter than the machines. Come on now, I can do this." And he did. Well, he sort of fixed it. You'll more about that in a minute. In 1977 and again in 1981, Glenn and I ran the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. And the first time was in kayaks, and the second time we were in a raft together. Here's a picture of Glenn going through the one of the rapids in 1977. Well, the ultimate story about Glenn and his VW camper bus happened when we decided to go out and run a river out in Colorado called the Yampa River. And there was a caravan of us going out there, about 4 or 5 cars. And Glenn's bus was among them. And we're driving along, and everything was fine. Glenn had just said he just finished fixing the engine again for the umpteenth time. And everything was fine until we started the big climb out of Salt Lake City on Highway 80, and his bus started smoking out the back. And so we got up to the summit, and he looked at me and said, "I can fix this." And so he pulled over under the shoulder, and with all the other cars behind us, we all pulled over, and he jumped out of the car, got his tools, crawled under the bus, and disconnected the engine from the motor mounts, unbolted it, dropped it down on the pavement, and started fiddling with the engine with all these cars going by and 18-wheelers coming within 3 feet of us. And anyway, chaos ensued. We had to figure out how to get out to the river, so most of us, including Glenn, piled into the remaining cars, and Glenn arranged to have from a nearby gas station, have his bus towed down to Salt Lake. And after we did the Yampa River, he took a Greyhound back to Salt Lake, got his bus working again, and then met us later on the rivers out in Colorado that we planned to do. So after getting his bus fixed in Salt Lake City, he drove back into Colorado looking for us so he could continue boating with us. And he met us on a river called the Upper Colorado River, and it's so high up into the mountains that it's almost to Denver. Anyway, it was spring flood, and the water was really high and dangerous, and he and a few other people from our group decided to go ahead and run it anyway, and Glenn was eager to get in his boat. He said, "I just want to get wet." So he got in his boat with everybody else, and they started down. It turned out to be pretty dangerous, and everybody was in over their heads, including Glenn. He flipped. He couldn't roll back up. He took a really bad swim, and his compatriots pushed him over to the side of the river, to the riverbank, and they dragged him out, and he flopped face down on the sand on the beach, and was laying there gasping for breath and shivering, and we were all standing around watching him. And then finally, one of our group, who was a beautiful young lady named Kathy. Yeah, we actually had a girl with us. Can you believe it? And she looked at Glenn and said, "Hey, maybe we should get him out of his wetsuit. And he looks pretty cold." And anyway, Glenn's determination to make everybody laugh came through again, because he mumbled, "Kathy, you just want to pants me." Anyway, we knew he was going to be okay after that statement. Well, back in our FUB days, Glenn would occasionally invite me over for dinner at his apartment, and it was a real treat for me, because he was a good cook, and he liked to cook and eat fresh food, as opposed to me. I was always eating TV dinners and packaged food. Anyway, I'd go over to his apartment. He was concocting a meal of broccoli and potatoes and a salad and a piece of meat, and they'd be these ingredients would be heaped up on our plates. And he looked at me and said, "This is all I want, Schreiber. All I want is a pile of food, just a pile of food." Another Glennism. Well, time passed, and Glenn and I eventually left our FUB days behind us, and Glenn met Janice in Yosemite, and they got married, and he moved to Monterey, and I eventually met Eileen, and we decided to get married in 2006. And I called Glenn and asked him to be my best man, and he fortunately accepted. And so I told him that the dress code was going to be business casual, no tuxedos required. I'm going to wear a shirt and tie probably, and so here's a couple of pictures of Glenn being my best man at the wedding. So Glenn appeared in his best plaid shirt. Good times. So anyway, that's it for me, and I want to thank Janice and Nathan and Kevin for allowing me to speak, and probably go way over my 1 minute, and just allow me to reminisce about Glenn and his defining characteristic, which was, I think it could come down to this determination and his self-confidence to be the best that he could be, and determining to be the best machinist he could be, so that he eventually he was making mechanisms for the space shuttle, and to be the best dad and have a family with Janice, and not let anything stand in his way. Anyway, we miss Glenn more than he could ever know. He was one of a kind, and they broke the mold. Thanks very much.